Hi, Jane Velez Mitchell, Talk Live, Jane Unchained. We're here with AYLAM ORIAN, who is the founder of an absolutely amazing concept called the NARD. The NARD stands for National Animal Rights Day, and it is so impactful. I want to show some of the images of people holding signs of animals and also actually holding actual animals who have died. AYLAM, take it away. Tell us about the NARD and what your plans are for this very unusual year.
So NARD, an acronym for the National Animal Rights Day, is one day a year, every first Sunday in June, where around the world, it's by now global, it's international, where people in different cities and different countries stop everything else they're doing and dedicating that day to animals. It always starts with an opening memorial service, a funeral service for the billions of animals that die every year because of human reasons, by human hands. But then we don't end there. After the ceremony, we actually celebrate. We want to celebrate the progress that our movement is making every year, the wins that the vegan and animal rights movement is making every year. And we also celebrate us as a community of like-minded people that fight for animals very hard all year round. So it kind of takes people on an emotional journey, starting from a very sad opening ceremony, sometimes, like you said, with some real victims from different industries that abuse animals. But we end on a hopeful note, a celebratory note, and we leave the event pumped to fight for animals even more for the next coming year.
So this is an unusual year. I have followed NARD for a long time, and we're one of the sponsors. We are totally jazzed for you. In fact, we were planning on being involved this year, and then everything went haywire with the coronavirus, which ironically is caused by the abuse of animals in the farm system. Despite any conspiracy theories you may have heard, the experts believe it began in a seafood /wet/meat market in Wuhan, China. The very first people who got sick came from that market to doctors in the hospital with the COVID-19. And it's believed to have spread from bats, possibly through pangolins, into this disgusting petri dish of blood and guts and feces and urine and everything else in this wet market. So it's interesting that it started with a wet market, and now you are honoring those victims of animal abuse for food, for fashion, for testing, etc.
Yeah, I can tell you, those animals that we honor in our ceremony, and we actually give them a funeral service, and we actually bury them or cremate them after our event. So these are animals that died on their own in all kind of bad facilities, including live wet markets here in the US. So we only take animals that died on their own because we don't want to give an incentive to anyone to kill animals for us. But they died on their own from the bad conditions in which they were kept in all kind of places, including live animal markets here in the US. I've myself been to a few of them here in Los Angeles. In the flesh, I was in there. And I've been to a few that, like you yourself, in New York. They are disgusting. They are disgusting. They are stinking, filthy, dirty places with cages with all kinds of animals in them, from chickens to pigs to bunnies to rabbits and baby cows and every other animal you can think of. Not as bad as China, but other farm animals, as we call them here. They're cramped in filthy cages in the back, and customers come to the front and they order what they want, a chicken and a rabbit, and if somebody goes in the back and kills these animals. Like you said, it's not very different than the wet markets in China. It's filled with excrements and blood and guts all over the place. And then we wonder how come these places, are a petri dish for all these viruses. So I know it's easy to think that, oh, it's China and they're crazy. They eat cats and dogs and all that. But we're not that better. We eat other kinds of animals, but we do have live markets, and we have factory farms, which are a more modern and industrialized version of a wet market. They're not that different. I mean, you've been to factory farms. We've all seen the videos, or maybe not all of us, most of us. animals are cramped in filthy conditions, in close proximity. They are being pumped with antibiotics so they don't develop disease, but still they do develop diseases because they have many rotting corpses among them. They're in close proximity. Sometimes they eat each other out of boredom and going crazy. So even factory farms, which is the modern way in which the Western world is keeping and raising animals for human consumption, are not that far away from live markets. They are also a breeding ground for all kind of disease and viruses. And the reason why we don't get more of these viruses more often is because they are being pumped with antibiotics and other medications to not get sick that often. Mm-hmm. But it happens, in the recent history, it keeps on happening, right? We had SARS, we had Ebola, we had avian flu, mad cow disease, swine flu. We know now that these all come from animals. So it doesn't matter if they come from a wet market or a live market here in the US or a factory farm. They all come from humans eating animals.
And the solution is to simply not eat them. I mean, you have to wonder, when is the culture going to get that message that all of this, climate change, the propensity for Americans to die of heart disease, 1 out of every 4 Americans will die of heart disease. That's from eating animals, plaque in the form of cholesterol getting clogged, clogging the blood going to their hearts. And the same thing with stroke. It's the arteries to the brain. And so, you have heart disease, you have stroke, you have cancer. Processed meat is officially cancer causing, according to the World Health Organization. And then you have this virus, and the virus attacks people who have the classic American meat and dairy laden diet, people who are suffering from heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and obesity. So for so many reasons, we try to wake people up, and your ceremony is one of the most dramatic, honestly, wake-up calls. I've told you many times you should do a documentary on this, because what you do, getting the actual animals, those people are holding deceased animals who've been picked up after being discarded by industry, whether it's the factory farming industry, the slaughterhouse industry, the animal testing industry, the fashion industry. And here they are gathering on the beach in Los Angeles, but they've gathered in Europe, they gather in New York, all over the world. What's going to happen with National Animal Rights Day this year? Because it is coming on Sunday, June 7th, not that far away. How can people get involved, and what's it going to look like, AYLAM?
Right. So we haven't made the final decision. We're having a conference call with all our international organizers on May 2nd, which is not 2 weeks from now. But it looks like, as of now, due to the pandemic, that we will have to transition from doing live events in all these cities, and we have 50 cities this year. We'll have to transition to doing one big global online event, which is a first for us. But it's our 10th event, so we wanted to celebrate it in an interesting way, and kind of the universe responded. And if it's going to be an online event, live event from all over the world, it's going to be definitely an interesting event. So we'll have people from all the way from Los Angeles, all the way on the other side of the globe, 16 hours different, in Japan, and everything in between, Australia, Taiwan, India. We have one country in Africa joining us, Nigeria this year, many countries, many cities in Europe, and of course, Canada and the US. So we're still figuring out the details, and we're, of course, let everybody know, and we'll post on our different pages on Facebook and Instagram. But it looks like we'll have a live event, probably on Zoom, for 1,000 people from all over the world. Different people from these cities will lead the opening ceremony of our event, and then they will lead the celebration part of our event. So somebody from, let's say, Nigeria will say some words, and somebody from Japan will play a song, and somebody from India will say, read a poem. So basically, we'll do a global event, which is going to be pretty new and exciting for us. But that's how we're going to celebrate the day, Sunday, June 7th.
So let me ask you this question. Will you have the deceased animals? Because to me, the most powerful See, you can talk about, people want to remain, like you can even show the photos, which are powerful, but when you see the people with the actual animals, and I've attended this numerous times in New York and LA, and when I see the animals, it's a totally different impact. It's just so powerful. And I don't know where you get the animals from, but obviously you said they're already deceased. You don't want anybody inspired to kill animals. We're all about not killing. But you get these animals that are often discarded. The fact that they're so easy to get means, just shows you how they're considered trash by the industry. You know, they don't need any boy calves in the dairy industry. So either they put them in veal crates, or they throw them on dead piles, or they shoot them. And so it's tragically easy to go to a factory farm or a slaughterhouse and find these animals. And so are you thinking of having a real animal, as people around the world do their moment, they would be holding an actual animal?
That's what we're aiming for. It's like you said, because of what's going on, it's a little difficult, even though we know that animals are actually safer than humans. It's a little difficult to procure the animals this year. And also we hear that a lot of slaughterhouse and other live meat markets workers are getting sick by the hundreds. So everything is a little on hold right now. But if we can still get some bodies of animals and honor them in this event, we will. And again, the idea is not, like you said, the idea is to show in a very respectful way, but still direct way, give a wake-up call to people, show people in a non-verbal way. We're not blaming anybody. We're not pointing a finger. We're just showing people how the animals they eat and wear and test on look like. Because most people will never go to a factory farm or a live market and see a chicken or a baby cow or a pig in their lifetime. We all grow up on little fairy tales and stories and movies of cute animals, and we think that that's how animals are raised, and we never see these animals in the face. We never look them in the eye. So that's what we do. We bring those animals out of these filthy places, show them to people, but in a very respectful way. But also, the other purpose of doing it, we're honoring them and giving them a funeral service, because most of these animals, like you said, are going to be either killed later on or discarded like trash. They're anonymous. Nobody knows them. They don't have a name. Nobody cares about them in the billions. So we care about them. We give them names. We honor them, each one of them, and then we give them a proper funeral and burial or cremation.
So long story short, the photo that you have here of a young man holding a dead pig. This looks like New York City or a major city.
That's actually Montreal, Canada.
Oh, okay. Tell us what you can about this photo. What happened to make this come together?
So again, this is, as you can see, the gentleman here is holding the body of a pig, and that's actually a baby pig, pretty small. And I don't know exactly where the team in Montreal got this specific pig, but we do the ceremony just like that. We hold them. If they're really heavy, we sit with them on the ground, but we hold them in a very tender way, just like you would hold your human baby, or your cat or your dog, right? We don't just put them on the ground for display. We hold them very tenderly. And I've seen all kind of images. You've seen them as well, of big, scary, strong guys holding animals in their hands and weeping. It's a very emotional, tender thing. Here you can see this lady's holding also a baby pig. And while they're holding them, we give these animals a name. We tell their story. We use music and poetry and spoken word to honor them. This is from Los Angeles from a few years ago. We did this under the Hollywood sign. You see, we have pigs here. We have dogs. We have cats. We have other animals, because this event caters to all animals, not just farm animals, because dogs and cats are abused by, the millions as well. This is actually from Toronto. I know it looks like the LA beach, but it's Toronto.
Oh, wow. Really? Because I know you've done them. I've been to the ones at the LA beach before, but you're saying this was in Toronto. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is from, I believe, South Carolina.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's.
And do you have the one from LA with our friends Joaquin?
Well, we can pull that up at some point. Yeah. We're limited as the number. Now, I know you're also doing here Eating animals equals COVID-19. This is very powerful. I know you have some memes. What are you planning to do with the memes?
Well, this one I saw on Instagram, but I created 2 other memes. I really had the idea, you know, just like you said, people are not waking up enough and not making the connection. And we have a golden opportunity here, so to speak, to really educate people about the disadvantages of eating animals. And one of the disadvantages is getting these diseases. Because I'm certain that once this is over, people will go back to eating animals as if there's no tomorrow and won't learn the lesson. So I really wanted to put a billboard or a few of them up in the streets of LA saying exactly that. These viruses.
Hey, what about this one? It's a little bit chopped off by the numbers, but 1 in every 4 new emerging infectious diseases in people come from animals.
Right.
And there you have an actual, this is what factory farming looks like today. It's an Orwellian, you know, Kafkaesque nightmare. These animals, they're spray painted when they're destined for death. They live in these horrible, this is luxury housing compared to some of the pigs who are kept in.
I was about to say the same. This is kind of pretty luxurious and spacious. Usually they're cramped in smaller cages. They can't even move. They can't turn around. I mean, you know, we're complaining about being in quarantine. Most of these animals, especially pig and chickens as well, in battery cages, cannot even move or turn around or spread their wings. It's unfathomable, the conditions in which we keep these animals. And again, we're talking about the West, not about live meat markets. Those conditions are horrendous. We're talking about the West, including the US. That's how animals are raised and kept in the US for human consumption. Here you see another meme, you know, just detailing all these diseases, all these viruses that we've known in recent years or in the last century and where they came from. See, it's all from, you know, cows, pigs, bats, chickens, camels. Some of them are wild animals. Some of them are what we call factory animals. So there's no difference really.
So I was talking to somebody today. It was a pretty sophisticated PhD engineer who said, if we don't learn from this one, the next one is going to be even worse. That, you know, it's almost like hitting bottom. And on a brighter note, Bank of America just issued a report that sounds like it was written by a vegan animal activist saying we have to stop eating with an M before it like this, talking about how within the next few years we have to transition to a plant-based economy because, and their reasoning is very accurate. It's not about compassion. It's not about anything, but there's too many people. It's unsustainable. And we're all going to have to transition to plant-based because a massive percentage of the Earth's surface is being used either for cattle grazing or to grow feed, to feed 70 to 90 billion land animals we kill every year. We're only 7.8 billion humans, and we're not eating as much of these cows. If you look at a cow or pig, all they're doing most of the time is eating. So they're eating way more than they produce as meat or any dairy product. And so it's just wildly unsustainable. Also, they made the climate change connection, and they talked about climate change and pollution and, you know, soil degradation. And I mean, there's a million reasons, habitat destruction, wildlife extinction. So when you see a mainstream organization like Bank of America looking at today's factory farming, I mean, who would invent something like this? Just look at this. This looks like something out of a horror film, but that is today's so-called farming. And just before we began speaking, there was a storm, activist storm to try to get, you know, the White House not to subsidize animal agriculture now that it's in trouble because of the coronavirus. And dairy is also in trouble because of the coronavirus, because they were propping up milk by selling it, really virtually forcing school children, many of whom are wildly allergic to dairy products, forcing them to drink milk by basically saying, here it is, that's what you have to drink it. And in some school districts, you even need a doctor's note not to have dairy milk, to have a plant-based milk, or to avoid having dairy put on your tray. So there was a whole tweet storm. It was a Facebook storm on the White House briefing that they had just moments before we started talking, where everybody was saying, don't subsidize animal agriculture. This isn't capitalism. This is corporate socialism. You know, the average hamburger would cost $25 today, not $1 or $2, if it wasn't subsidized by us taxpayers. And we're also subsidizing the dairy industry. And then we're also paying the very high medical costs when people get sick with heart disease, diabetes, obesity, cancer. The World Health Organization has determined that cancer, that processed meat is officially cancer causing. Let me say it again, processed meat is officially cancer causing. So now with this pandemic, you wonder, you know, what's it going to take for people to wake up, you know?
Well, you know, it's a good question, I think. And me and you, we spoke about a week ago, and you told me, listen, because, you know, all of us animal rights activists and vegans, we're fighting very hard trying to find, you know, some of us are writing books, how the world is going to go vegan one day. How are we going to win this fight one day? And everybody has theories. Oh, we'll do it through this route and the climate change route and this route. And then nature comes and also literally forces us to look at things and literally showing us, okay, you want to know how the world's going to go vegan? By a big pandemic that will wipe out half of the population. So any way you look at it, we're heading towards like a really bad ending, right? There's no light at the end of the tunnel. Like climate-wise, you know, animal agriculture, we know now it's a huge contributor to climate change, like you said, global warming, pandemics, animal agriculture, people getting sick, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, all these things, animal agriculture. Any way we look at it, it's pointing towards a really bad ending for the human race and this planet if we don't wake up. And nature is now maybe trying to wake us up by forcing this thing on us and forcing us to look at things. Some of us know, you know, have seen the writing on the wall. We know that it's all related to consuming animals. Some of us are still have our blinders on. So I don't know. Maybe nature will have to force us to wake up. Maybe either this or the climate or one of these.
Yeah, I was reading actually about addiction because I just celebrated 25 years sober, and I was just struck by the parallels between addiction and meat and dairy consumption. Until you're hitting bottom, until you've hit bottom, you're not ready to listen. And no matter what anybody says, you're like, don't tell me. I don't want to know. I want to do what I want to do. And then something really bad happens. You know, in my case, I made a fool of myself at a party in Hollywood. In some people's case, they drove the wrong way.
That's normal for parties in Hollywood.
Well, it was a humdinger, believe me. But for other people, it's, you know, it's killing somebody on the freeway. What is our bottom when it comes to eating animals? That's what I'd like to know. Is this it? Or do we have to go even further down? Do we have to get to the point where millions of people are wiped out? We know, you know, in previous pandemics, you know, the Black Death, it killed half of Europe. Sure, I'm going way back in history, but those who do not learn the mistakes of history, as they say, doomed to repeat them. So when people, you know, turn off and they don't want to listen, it is frustrating. But that's why I think sometimes if you just look at what you've done here with the NARD, and I try to invite people, it was funny. I think sometimes people sense what they're going to see. There was couple of friends of mine, I really wanted them to see the NARD in New York when you did it, you know, a couple of years ago. And, oh, they just were a little late. Couldn't quite make it.
Yeah.
But when you see this, it's so powerful when you see the dead animals and you actually see them with your own eyes. It's different. It's different than just reading about it. Okay. It's different. I can tell you myself, having experienced National Animal Rights Day, it's extremely powerful. And for those of you who think, well, that's too depressing, it's reality. So it's important to face hard truths to grow. Pain is the biggest inspiration for growth. Without pain, there is not that much growth. We all have to have a painful experience and then decide to do something right. Sometimes it's a civil war. Sometimes it's a world war. Sometimes it's a pandemic. But eventually, the morally wrong thing you have to face. you have to face the consequences. And that's what we're facing right now.
And believe us, we're saving people the really horrendous images of these animals in those places, live meat markets and factory farms. If everybody would go now to visit a live meat market like one of those in China or here, New York has 80 of them. LA, I know, I told you, I've been in at least 5 of them in my own flesh. If everybody would go to one of those places or to a factory farm, which is again the other way that the West is raising animals for human consumption. It's not as filthy as and insane as a wet market, but it's not that different. If everybody,
it's even worse. I mean, honestly, I want to just say, because I was just researching this earlier today, is the live slaughter, the high-speed slaughter. You know, the Trump administration approved high-speed slaughter of pigs, and it is a horror movie. They have gotten undercover footage. There's body parts flying everywhere. There's hair and fingernails going into the product. The dead animals. I mean, it's like something out of a serial killer movie. And so some of the slaughterhouses that have been shut down because of the coronavirus, because the workers are working elbow to elbow, risking their lives so that you at home can buy a product that's bad for you, bad for the planet, and involves incredible torture. It's a lose, 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 lose. Not to mention, it is causing antibiotic resistance. At least 70% of all antibiotics produced are fed to factory farm animals because the conditions are so horrific that if they didn't pump them with antibiotics, they'd all die. So they pump them with antibiotics. So we're developing antibiotic resistance. Additionally, it's contributing to world hunger because meat is a very inefficient food source. Animals eat well over 40 times what they produce as meat or dairy. It takes 8 to 25 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of steak. We could eliminate world hunger if 70% of all the soy that is fed to farm animals, 70% or more of all soy is fed to farm animals. People don't realize this. If it was fed directly to humans, we could wipe out world hunger. Okay? Yeah. So all of that, and now people are dying. So what I said, I wrote a little comment in the New York Times. They were doing a story about the slaughterhouses and all the workers. I interviewed a union leader just the day before yesterday who represents 3,000 slaughterhouse workers at one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cow slaughterhouses in America, in Colorado. She said 3 of her workers have died. Many of them are sick. Some of them are hospitalized. There's very almost impossible to do. You can't do social distancing on a line where everybody's elbow to elbow chopping up body parts.
Plus, so again, like I was trying to say, yeah, it's disgusting. It's filthy. It's, you know, it's literally, it's hell. Those places are hell. I mean, we've been there. We've seen the images. We've seen the videos. I don't know how else to describe it. It's hell on earth. And like I said, if everybody would go to these places, everybody would go vegan tomorrow. But like you said, people don't want to face the reality, and because it's inconvenient, and they prefer to have their blinders on. So yeah.
Well, I find personally that when it hits people themselves, okay, and it's hard to make the correct connection. When Hurricane Florence hit North Carolina, there are a lot of concentrated animal feeding operations there, which the farms are fewer than fewer. Farm is a word. What they really are today are warehouses packed with factory farms, factory farmed animals packed in windowless warehouses where the people who go in have to wear a coat, these kinds of protective gears, because the place is so filthy and urine and feces smelling and chemical filled. And then they're just taken from there to the slaughterhouse. The only time these animals see the sky is on the ride to the slaughterhouse, often without food or water for long, long distances across state lines. I mean, it's institutionalized torture. Institutionalized torture. And here's the thing, is that people don't want to see that. They've got their blinders on. They want to even tell themselves they're animal lovers because they have a pet. I have 4 companion animals, 5 now. I just adopted another because of the shelter crisis driven by the coronavirus crisis. So they want to say they're animal lovers, but they are co-signing, subsidizing, and acting as co-conspirators in the torture and murder of these animals. And if you try to tell them that, they get very upset. Right. They get angry at the messenger. Messenger is a bad person for daring to tell them they're not good people if they are subsidizing the torture, the unnecessary torture and murder of other beings.
Right.
So what has to happen? It has to hit them personally.
Right.
Pain, personal pain. But they have to make the connection. So with Hurricane Florence, which is the result of climate change to a large degree, these more serious hurricanes, the Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Florence, devastating this area where there were concentrated animal feeding operations, where they locked the animals inside and let them drown to death inside their warehouses.
Yeah.
Truly morally repugnant, I would say evil behavior. So we held a news conference, a coalition of animal and environmental groups. The news cameras came, they never aired it, but instead they aired a meat barbecue for the victims of Hurricane Florence. So as long as people are in a victim place and they don't want to regard themselves as participants, it's very hard to talk to them because now you're attacking the victim. When we were trying to say, yes, we're sorry that you got wiped out in Hurricane Florence, but here's how you're participating in the conditions that made that happen. We were not allowed to tell that story. The mainstream media, which is advertiser-based, primarily fast food, pharmaceuticals, meat, dairy, pharmaceuticals, does not want that information out there. And so they did not make the connection. Now, the question is, are they going to make the connection this time around with the coronavirus? Okay, they're already coming up with conspiracy theories that it started in a lab that are being pushed by people in the United States. And I think it's very interesting that that discussion started out of nowhere as soon as the slaughterhouses started shutting down. I think there are very powerful forces that don't want us to make the connection between slaughter of animals and the viruses. But those people are stupid, because if we don't make the connection, the next virus is going to wipe out a lot more people. And we're already facing a potential Great Depression as it is. So what do these businesses think that they're going to do when the whole world is in complete shambles? I mean, it's the same thing as climate change.
I thought about it yesterday. If I was, and I would never in a million lifetimes even get close to being that, if I was an owner of a business that profits off of the abuse and killing of animals, what's going on, what's happening now would be such a wake-up call for me. And I would really think, wow, do I really want to continue my business, my livelihood, based on something like that? That is not only cruel and insane and vicious and sadistic, but also really bad for human health and really has a potential of really harming humanity, not just your little few consumers, humanity as a whole, because these things spread. If I was an owner of a business like that, I would say, you know what, I'm getting out of this business. I'm doing something else. I don't care. I'll manufacture toothpicks. Who cares? I'm not going to base my livelihood on something unreliable and dangerous as this is. So I hope some of these big conglomerates, that these CEOs that own these big conglomerates, and by the way, a lot of the slaughterhouses and the big manufacturers of meat in the US are owned by China. They're owned by big CEOs in China.
Yes. Smithfield is owned by a Chinese company. That's the largest cluster in South Dakota of coronavirus cases in the United States. Not just me saying it. It was on the Rachel Maddow show last night, the lead story. It's all over the internet. Everybody's covering it. The biggest cluster of coronavirus cases right now, 644 the last time I checked, 644 are located in that slaughterhouse. People who were in the slaughterhouse, along with some people who had business with the slaughterhouse. Okay, so that's shut down. Now, the other slaughterhouse where I interviewed the union leader that shut down, which is in Colorado, it's owned by JBS, which is a Brazilian company. That is the largest meat processor in the world. So what's really interesting is that there's so many misnomers. We talk about, well, it's a personal choice. No, it ain't, any more than driving the wrong way down a freeway and wiping out a bunch of innocent people is a personal choice. Right. We talk about, well, it's capitalism, law of supply and demand. No, it ain't. These products would be far more expensive. The average hamburger would be $25, $30 if it wasn't subsidized by your hard-earned tax dollars. We say, well, it's protein. Well, guess what? Our culture is eating more protein than any culture in the history of humankind, and we're sick. We're fat, sick, and nearly dead, and our healthcare costs are through the roof. I mean, all of these arguments are lies, and yet there are so many very powerful, moneyed forces that are not looking down the long term. They're just looking to the next quarter, and they're not looking at the big picture, although I will say there's a caveat. Some are. I want to share the screen I have right now. I hope I can do this. Wish me luck. I'm going to share the screen, my entire screen. I'm going to put this up, okay, right here. This is Bank of America Global Research. It was just released a couple of days ago. We can't keep meeting eating like this. And it uses an example. This is Bank of America. I'm going to go to page 4 and just read what it says. Come dine with me in the future. A day in the life of what you might eat. You wake up on a morning in the not too distant future. You're absolutely starving for breakfast. What's on the menu? You've been converted by your Gen Z daughter to switch to veganism, as you can no longer reconcile eating real meat and animal products with its impact on climate change. Food companies have been on the case and developed extensive nutrition libraries, cataloging plants from all over the world to see how they can be transformed into different types of food and thus rely less on livestock farming. Moreover, real meat is expensive, with the recent avian flu pandemic impacting the world's poultry population and a global meat tax having pushed up protein prices. And then it talks about eggless eggs from mung beans. I mean, I was just so excited to read that because it sounds like you and I or a bunch of animal activists or vegans wrote it. It's the Bank of America. So some people are the big minds out there they know it's unsustainable, animal agriculture. That's why JBS actually makes vegan products. A lot of these big meat companies, they see the handwriting on the wall. And so they're starting to produce their own plant-based meat alternatives. I hope, given that these slaughterhouses are being shuttered now because so many of these workers are coming down with coronavirus, that also makes them realize, oh my gosh, maybe the time is now to transition to plant-based. Now we know that, it's also the time where they're coming up with more Machiavellian, twisted, evil solutions. They've created a 13-story pig producing facility in China. And then the horrible animal industry shill who wrote about it called it a pig hotel. I would call it a pig torture house. Again, we can't even show you. We can't begin to show you what they do to these animals. If somebody came over and castrated your dog without anesthesia, would you think that would be okay? All male pigs are castrated without anesthesia. They literally rip their gonads out. We've all seen the videos. I mean, that's just one example. One example. It's a hideous, morally bankrupt. When I go to Europe and I see the medieval torture museums and they show the rack, how we put people on a rack and we pulled it till they snapped. And you think, how could a human being do something like that?
We do it to animals.
We do it to animals. and we're going to look back at all these things, the pig gestation crates and the way they treat these animals. We're going to put it in a torture museum. And the point is, people say, well, I don't know. No, people don't want to know. At this point, there's been enough, AYLAM. You've been doing National Animal Rights Day for a decade, okay? You've been showing these images for a decade. There have been countless documentaries. There's information on hundreds of YouTube channels. It's almost impossible to avoid the truth. So what I say is, it's not that they don't know, they don't want to know.
Right. You know, if you're sitting in a really fancy steakhouse and eating a nice piece of meat on your plate that has been cooked to perfection, yeah, you don't want to think where it came from, right? But it came from the same filthy factory farm and slaughterhouse as the dirty meat that somebody else buys in McDonald's, or not mentioning names, in a fast food chain for $1. It's the same. The animals went through the same process. It's still dangerous. It's still bad for you. And if you're really sitting in that restaurant not wanting to know where it came from, like we're saying, nature, reality will force you at some point when it really starts hurting you to wake up and look at what you're eating. Like everything else we consume, we kind of try to find out where did it came from, right? You wouldn't buy, I'm trying to think of an example. You wouldn't buy an expensive watch that somebody just told, hey, this is a really good watch, expensive watch. You will try to find out, wait, what brand is it? Where is it made? Oh, it's a Swiss watch. Okay, now I want to buy it. But when you go to a restaurant or a steakhouse and eat a piece of meat, you don't want to know. You don't want to ask any questions. You don't care. Oh, I don't care if it was killed a month ago and kept in a rotting warehouse and somebody washed it with ammonia, so it's edible or something, right? I mean, I find this behavior, I don't understand it.
Well, and then there are people who say, no, I know exactly where my meat came from. I'm very careful, and it's organic and humanely raised. And to which
grass-fed,
and we don't want to talk about brand names, but they have done undercover investigations into these humane farms, and they're hellholes. It's all a marketing scam. It's a marketing.
They all end up in the same slaughterhouse. It's, you know, even if there was a cow that was allowed to keep her baby calf and give the baby milk for their entire life, and then at some point they were asked very gently to, please, would you please come on this truck for 3 days with no food and end up in a slaughterhouse? Even if that was possible, they all end up on the same filthy trucks in the same filthy, diseased-laden slaughterhouses, right? No matter how they were raised or what grass they were fed and all that bullshit. Organic and all these labels. I mean, we've seen the videos, we've seen the places in our own eyes. We know the reality
ourselves. I mean,
I know.
You and I have gone to slaughterhouses. We've been in there. We bear witness at, and there's a whole bear witness movement called the Save Movement, which has people stand outside slaughterhouses, greets the trucks as they arrive, try to give water and comfort and love to the animals going into slaughter. And, you know, it's so hard to get animal eaters to go and observe. They very much resist. I mean, one couple was going to go with me, and then she called me, my husband doesn't want to go. He thinks he'll get sick. I said, well, if he's going to get sick, then maybe he shouldn't eat them. If he's not even man enough, you know, to go and stand and watch the animals as they go into the slaughterhouse, baby, 6 months old, ripped from their mothers, confused, terrified, going into slaughter, and you look at them and it's like looking at a person. And then, you know, somebody tells you, yeah, I had a hot dog at the ballpark. Yeah, well, your hot dog came from a tortured animal. Okay. Right. Just know that. And then they want to change the subject. But, you know, I feel it's a generational divide. I feel like young people, you saw Bank of America in their assessment of the future of food, they created this scenario where the Gen Z daughter makes the parent go vegan. And I think that's the way it's happening. There are young people who are not subjected to the constant brainwashing that's on television, where they subliminally equate eating meat and dairy to everything from patriotism to sex appeal to upward mobility to all this stuff it has nothing to do with. They're not getting the brainwashing. And so they're freer thinkers, and they're not into it. They're not as into it, and they're coming up with their own. They're more likely to want a green juice than a glass of milk. So I feel it's a generational divide. And I do feel that we're at a turning point right now in history. So tell us how we can get involved if we want to get involved in National Animal Rights Day, which is coming up on, let's see, we got the banner right here. It's coming up on Sunday, June 7th. So how do we get involved?
You can search for us on Facebook or Instagram, NARD or National Animal Rights Day. You'll find many pages, or you can go to our website, thenard.org. It's being revamped as we speak, so it might look a little weird, but it's going to be have a shiny, slick new look in a few days. But anyway, get in touch with us. If you're in a city where we have an event, and we have a map on our website of all the cities around the world where we have an event this year, if you're in one of those cities, there's a link there to the city's Facebook page. Connect with the organizers, ask about the details, when we're going to congregate, if we're going to do it online, what time, and all that. If you're in a city that doesn't have a NARD event on the map, contact us. We will either help you start a NARD event online this year, or we'll refer you to the closest organizer or event. So we want everybody around the world that want to commemorate the day with us to join us on that, what will likely be an online event on Sunday, June 7. We'll give all the details of where to log in and how to join. But we want as many people around the world to join this live event. We're hoping to have some big celebrity speakers and performers in this event, again, from all over the world. We'll probably have different languages, people from all many countries speaking their languages, all animal lovers uniting to celebrate commemorate and celebrate animals that day.
I want to thank you, AYLAM. You're one of my heroes. You never falter. You devote yourself to this. I've called you at the last minute and said, we need help, and you just come to the rescue every time. So I love National Animal Rights Day. I urge everyone to get involved. Please get involved. It's very powerful. Bring some pre-vegan friends. Let them see the animals, the dead animals in the flesh. It will transform them. And then stay for the party. It's a very fun party. And it's like a wake, you know. Everybody ends up getting very close and talking and sharing. And it's a brilliant idea. I think it's absolute genius. Thank you so much for joining us, AYLAM.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jane.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.